Now, South Africa is currently reporting various incidents of inhumane acts where women as well as children are murdered. The pandemic has always been around, with spurts of public outcry which quickly die out. Tonight, we probe the various stakeholders of government who are influencing policy direction at the highest level. The Congress of South African Trade Unions is the country's biggest trade union federation and is a member of the tripartite alliance alongside the governing ANC. We're joined tonight by Cosatu Second Deputy-President, Louisa Thipe. A very good evening to you and thank you for your time tonight. With the position that you hold and your closeness to the corridors of power and indeed being in the corridors of power yourself, what type of influence have you yielded within the governing party as far as policy change is concerned regarding gender-based violence?
Thanks for having me. There are so many challenges, yes, but as you said, being closer to the power doesn't mean things just come as easy as all that. But we have been really advocating for gender-based violence. We've been making sure that our members, our shop stewards, receive training, and that is what the role of us as unions in championing these issues of gender-based violence have been.
We know that harassment and gender-based violence is not just seen outside in society and in normal day-to-day life, but also within the workplace. Tell us about the work that you're doing within the workplaces for gender parity and also just the end of gender-based violence and harassment for women.
What we are doing in the workplaces, as I've indicated, is more to equip the members and making sure that we enter into agreement that the employer should make sure that he as well or she takes care of the workers. We make sure that there are training and the employer adheres to all the agreements that we reach with them that will safeguard the workers, particularly your women folk.
You have been active outside the workplaces as well. A couple of years ago, you were picketing outside a court in order for rape charges, to be made harsher, and in order for perpetrators of crimes to receive harsher sentences. Talk us through some of the areas that you specifically have been advocating for.
We've been talking on the ratification of the Convention 190, which will then be taking care of eliminating violence and harassment in the world of work. And we again would be looking at making sure that women are not being treated as sex objects. So those are the lessons that we normally, and when we campaign out there, we make a lot of noise around.
We hear the noise. We also hear the talk. There have been a lot of conventions put together. How do we ensure that we are not just holding talk shops and that there are decisive actions that will be the outcome of these talk shops and workshops and imbizos that are currently being held in the area of gender-based violence? How do we ensure that we're not just talking, but there's actually action after that talk?
That's very unfortunate because we always would hear some commitments, but no implementation. At times we just see even our government, our political will from the government being not as we expect it to be. But we, at some point, we were raised when the president came out very harshly on the gender-based violence, which in the recent past days and months has really been a major issue. But what we are again advocating is that there should be harsher sentences, and this perpetrator should not be given bail, and arrest should be made as swiftly as possible. No criminal person should just go around having done such crucial and having killed our own sisters. So we are really saying there should be that political will from the government, and we are appealing once more for the ratification, which in fact is a commitment that the government knows of but cannot implement.
It's very discouraging when you hear organizations such as yourself, speaking of government as though there is nothing that you yourselves can do, when indeed you are part of the tripartite alliance alongside the African National Congress. And if there's anybody who can make a change, it's organizations such as yourself. What are you doing in that regard to be that fire under the belly of the ruling party and the fire under the belly of government?
We just not are quiet. We're not just sitting back. There are so many strides that we have made, and again, we are looking at the legislation, and we are saying, even though we might be seen, or we are, of course, part of the tripartite alliance, but there have been strides made. We might have not achieved everything up to so far, but we are getting there.
And we'll leave it at that for this evening. Thank you, ma'am, for your time. That's Louisa Thipe there from Cosatu.